Welcome to day 2 of the European Quality Assurance Forum. I'm welcoming you, and I'm glad you made it. For those of you who were not with us yesterday, we already started with great sessions and very lively discussions about the theme of flexible higher education and its implications for quality assurance. Actually, it's Friday morning, it's day 2. Usually I would start the day with an anecdote about the location that we all gathered. I would say here in Finland, and probably talk about the weather. Many of you did that yesterday already. Well, this year, EQAF is totally online, and so we don't have that one central location. Instead, we have hundreds of locations, your living room, your kitchen, your offices. In that sense, we have micro locations. And that basically brings me already to the topic of this morning's session, which are micro-credentials. And I'm very happy to hand over to the chair of this session, my colleague from the program committee of EQAF, and who is also a member of the ESU executive committee, Jakub Grodecki.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ronnie. It's good morning to all of you, and welcome to the second day of the European Quality Assurance Forum. My name is Jakub Grodecki, I'm from ESU, and I hope you all have a great reflections and key thoughts after you may carry on back home already after first day. Let's hope that the Friday 13th of amazing year 2020, sounds scary, will be a great day for the second day of our forum. At first session today, we will be discussing the topic that you might have heard of recently, as the discussion around it is visible in multiple grounds on European higher education area. The topic of today's session is micro-credentials paving the way to flexible higher education. There are already dozens working definitions of what micro-credentials are, and there are some common agreements regarding the feature that those should have. Will those assist us to make the learning path more flexible and boost the recognition processes? The session that you just joined might equip you with more understanding of the topic by looking at it from the different perspective of our speakers. Let's see on where exactly are we heading. Before going further, I have some technical information for you. I would like to remind you that the session is recorded. The recordings will be available later on the EUA YouTube channel. Just go to the youtube.com and search European University Association and put the title of this session. For all of those who have registered for the session, you will also get a link to the recording and the presentations of this session after it will take place. To make session as much interactive as possible in the digital environment, participants can interact through the chat, where you should address the technical questions, and through the Q&A tab. The questions that you will be putting on will be rated, so the most relevant questions will be asked for the presenters. At last but not least, participants can download materials like the event booklet and the handout from the download tab. So, I would like to introduce our speakers now. For today, 3 great speakers are joining us. Please welcome to our digital stage today, Elena Silan, the Policy Officer in Institutional Development from European University Association, Florian Rampelt, Managing Director of AI Campus from Stifterverband, Germany, and Antoni Camilieri, founder of the Knowledge Innovation Center. Our first speaker for today will be Elena Silan. Elena is a policy and project officer in Institutional Development Unit, where her work focuses mainly on quality assurance in higher education. She contributes to the management of EUA's institutional evaluation program and the coordination of the annual European Quality Assurance Forum, as well to the implementation of projects related to quality assurance. So, if we can ask for the presentation of Elena on the screen, we could start on with the presentation.
Meantime, thank you, Jakub, for your warm welcome, and welcome everyone to our second day of EQAF. Now we see our presentation. Yeah.
We see the presentation. I know that you, together with Tia Lukkola, have conducted a desk research study on micro-credentials as part of the MicroBall project. According to your findings, what do you believe are the main reasons different stakeholders get interested in micro-credentials?
Indeed, EUA is one of the partners in MicroBall project. And as part of the project, we conducted a desk research which examined the current status of micro-credentials. And in the course of the study, we looked into different perspectives on micro-credentials. And from policymakers' perspective, when we compare micro-credentials with conventional degrees, micro-credentials are promoted and seen as shorter, more targeted, in the sense that the skills and the competencies they tackle are more niche, and they are more flexible because students can take them during evening, during weekends, whenever they feel comfortable. And of course, micro-credentials as such, they offer a way to fulfill the need for upskilling and reskilling the labor force. Then from a higher education institution perspective, micro-credentials offer a way to provide more targeted and specialized training than the one offered through conventional degrees. And as such, they increase the visibility of the institution. They also attract different groups of students. They widen the geographical reach. They also increase universities' responsiveness to labor market needs and to learners' needs as well, and allow to experiment with different kinds of technologies and pedagogies. For learners, micro-credentials are appealing and interesting because they offer an entry mechanism to a degree program. And I must say, well, to take up a micro-credential, you don't need to take any entry exams, so it's easy for students to take them. Also, students get interested because they can study a micro-credential from a well-known institution, or from given by a very well-known professor. So there are very good incentives for students to take them. Also, taking a micro-credential helps a student to acquire interdisciplinary knowledge and skills, which may later help them to be more competitive on the labor market. And of course, the flexibility that a micro-credential offers is also very appealing for students, mainly for those who have a full-time job, or who have a full-time study, or who have a family, because they can flexibly adapt their study plan. And last but not least, employers' perspective. Micro-credentials may help them understand clearly what kind of skills the potential employee have to offer. And in this way, they can easily identify which employees are best for their vacancies. And also, there are a number of businesses and different kind of institutions that offer on-job training mechanisms in form of micro-credentials. So they develop them and they offer them to their own employees. So this would be my answer, Jakub.
Thank you so much for putting this to all the perspective. We clearly see that it's not just a higher education institution perspective, but much broader. But we would like to focus on this higher education institution perspective. So focusing on that, as the main providers of micro-credentials, how and what kind of micro-credentials do they offer?
You are right. There is a wide range of micro-credential providers. We, in the course of our study, we noticed that micro-credentials can be offered in collaboration across different kinds of organizations. If taken higher education institutions, they can collaborate with different businesses and have micro-credentials done together, or they can collaborate with non-governmental organizations and again build some micro-credentials with them. But higher education institutions offer credit-bearing micro-credentials, for which a student would receive credits, and non-credit-bearing micro-credentials, which are the opposite to the first ones. And then they provide them as separate learning modules, and in this case, usually they can be both. They can be credit-bearing and they can be non-credit-bearing. Also, when provided as separate learning modules, they can be stacked and they can accumulate into a larger credential. Then they can be offered as part of a conventional degree, and in this case, they tend to be credit bearing, and usually they are automatically recognized because they are part of this conventional degree. And last, they can be offered also as part of the lifelong learning provision of the institution. In terms of delivery mode, they can be delivered in face-to-face mode, in hybrid mode, but as with MOOCs, hybrid mode tends to be more expensive for institutions, and they can be delivered also in online mode, so totally digital. There is the wrong perception that micro-credentials are delivered only in online mode, which is not fully accurate, because they can be delivered in face-to-face, as said, during evening classes or during weekend classes. Of course, micro-credentials are linked to digital, which may refer, for example, to the format of the credential. So let's say the certificate or the diploma, the presentation of this credential, also the storage of this credential. But it refers also to the mode of provision and to the content. The content of the micro-credentials can be digital and can be open to all for access.
Thank you so much. I guess it's a very complex thing, and very nice to hear that the description of that. But as all big topic has its own challenges. So what do you believe are the biggest challenges of micro-credentials?
Yes, of course. Indeed, there are issues and constraints related to micro-credentials, and first of them is the lack of a consensus on a definition. And of course, this lack of consensus leads to other issues, which are also listed on my slide here. Regarding the definition, actually, there is quite a lot of work already done in this direction. And Microball project, through our study, we developed already a draft definition, which was discussed during the kickoff conference of the project, and will be further discussed during the working groups of the project. And the Commission's micro-credentials consultation group has also developed a definition. So there is already work in the right direction. And as said, lack of definition leads to lack of clarity. Mainly are affected students, because it's difficult for them to choose from the whole amount of micro-credentials, to choose the most suitable one. Sometimes the providers do not put transparently the information on their platforms, so the students do not know for sure what are the learning outcomes and what is the value of the micro-credentials they take. And most affected are, of course, the students that receive less support in finding the right and the most suitable learning path. And those are low-income students, adult learners, the first-generation students as well. So transparency for sure is needed. And again, lack of definition leads to lack of validation mechanisms, which are related to lack of criteria for micro-credentials. And regarding higher education institutions, there are no funding mechanisms that would incentivize European higher education institutions to develop further and offer micro-credentials, which, for example, exists in New Zealand. New Zealand has well established already funding mechanism for well-designed micro-credentials. So for those well-designed micro-credentials, they offer funding. And of course, there are issues related to micro-credential storage and portability.
Thanks for that answer. let's hope and let's imagine that we have the definition, we have working micro-credential system. But what about quality assurance of micro-credentials if it would be if it would be the case that we will have this system of recognition?
Yes, we looked in during our study. Of course, we had another part of the study, by the way, which you can download from the handouts. On the third part, we examined how the existing EHA tools can be used for adapting or adapted, if needed, to micro-credentials. Regarding the ESG, they cover micro-credentials. And as it already mentions, it applies to all the types of delivery. It doesn't matter, are they flexible or not, are they short or not. Of course, the responsibility for assuring the quality of micro-credentials, which are offered by higher education institutions, lays with higher education institutions, because they are the ones who have to have mechanisms in place for any type of delivery they put up there for learners. And it doesn't matter, is it micro-credential which bears credit, or one that is non-credit bearing. Any type of provision has to go through a quality assurance process. And of course, when it comes to other types of provider, that's another question. We don't know if other types of provider have internal quality assurance mechanisms, and if they do, what kind. We also don't know if they have any external quality assurance mechanisms, and we tend to believe they do not. And when it comes to the external quality assurance related to higher education institutions, there is one case when micro-credentials can fall into a gap, let's say. For example, when micro-credentials are not part of a bigger conventional degree or a bigger program, and let's say the external quality assurance is focused on program accreditation, then those micro-credentials fall out. They won't be looked at, they won't be examined. But we have the internal quality assurance who should assure that these are of good quality. And there have been quite a lot of discussions about the quality of the credential itself. So the diploma or the certificate that we receive, or the students receive. So in regards to that, DSG again has a standard, the standard 1.4, which touches upon it, saying that the institution should apply consistently the regulations, and these regulations should cover all the student life cycle, including the certification. So that should be also covered by the institutions. And just to conclude my presentation, I think my time soon is up. Micro-credentials are a very hot topic at the moment, as we noticed, but they are not new to us, because people have been receiving different certifications and awards for a long time. It's just now that the need for upskilling and reskilling is very high on the agenda, and of course with coronavirus problems, when people lose their jobs, this is something which is needed again. And also they do, I keep saying in all my presentations that micro-credentials do not substitute higher institution degrees or conventional degrees, but complement them. It's a truth which needs to be repeated so that people, all people interested in micro-credentials understand it. And we should understand that the volume of learning that is done during a conventional degree can't be compared with the volume of learning during taking a micro-credential. And as said, the consensus on a definition is needed, and this will bring, of course, much clarity and will ease the life of all the parties involved. And we have at the moment diversification in providers, diversification in the types of micro-credentials offered, and we should cherish that, because it's good that students have from what to select and have a wide range of selection. So with this, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you, Jakub.
Thank you very much for this kind of introduction of our session and setting up the discussion, defining the problems that we will face probably in a close future while thinking of the whole concept of micro-credentials. I have noted the questions from the audience. I've copied them to my notepad. We will come back to those when we will have a time at the end of the session, because now we still have 2 presentations to go. And one of the questions that is most voted was partly answered by Elena in the conclusion when it comes to institutionally based accreditation and internal quality assurance. But we will go back to that in the question and answer part. But for now, I would like to, and thank you very much, Elena, again. I would like to invite another speaker, the second one, the Florian Rampelt, is Managing Director of AI Campus and Deputy Managing Director of Hochschulforum Digitalisierung. I hope that I said it right in German, at Stiftverband in Berlin. Together with the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, he is developing the AI Campus as a European digital learning platform on artificial intelligence. We will now have a chance to listen about the AI Campus from Florian. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's great to be back at EQAF 2020. Elena, thanks a lot for the great presentation. When I looked through the report, I really liked it, but it was also nice to see that some of the work we have been doing in other contexts, looking at Antoni quality of credentials years before, are now really getting into a more focused approach. And Antoni is definitely going to talk about that later on. What I would like to talk to you about is one possible approach to develop micro-credentials, online courses, alternative learning formats and alternative credentials in a broad cooperation of higher education institutions and beyond. And the example that I'm going to present to you is the AI Campus. I will also just post a YouTube link for those who want to learn a little more. There's also a small video on the AI Campus on YouTube, and there's also a platform. With the AI Campus, we started 1 year ago. We were tasked by the German government to work on an AI competent society. It's probably the same all around the world. I see we have like 500 participants here today. And I think digital skills, data literacy, and AI skills and competencies are key for many of our of the countries who are represented here. And with the AI Campus, we want to promote such AI skills and competencies on a broad scale, but also get more people interested in the topic and a future job perspective, of course. By enabling people to understand, question, design AI, we believe that we can really strengthen society in a broad range, but also higher education institutions. One of my key messages throughout the last years in the European higher education area is we need to talk also about curation and look out for the great ideas that others have based on quality standards. So the AI Campus curates online courses and other learning formats that are available out there already on the one hand, and on the other hand, we are working with especially higher education institutions throughout Germany and Luxembourg on new AI Campus Original, which are different learning formats that need different QA processes that I'm just going to talk about in a few seconds. The overall project consortium, I think, is not that interesting for you guys. You can check it out on our website. What is really crucial also for quality assurance, I believe. I have been working on online learning for quite some time, even before the AI Campus, and very often I saw the basic values and the basic understanding of what we want to do with our online learning provision is crucial. So some of the aspects, and that comes also to the quality of credentials, is you have to agree that your learning provision is based on principles such as interoperability, which lead to certain needs of transparency of standards that you work on. You need instructional design principles that focus on social learning formats, which is often not the case in online learning. And one of the key aspects for me is that open educational resources and open code education as a public good is really crucial in the modern digital learning world, and thus it's also crucial for new standards that we need additionally to what we're working on already, looking, for example, at the European standards and guidelines.
Thank you very much for the introduction of the AI Campus principles, but we would like to hear more about exactly what we are seeing on the slide, which is the learning side of it. What about that? What about the learning on the AI Campus?
The learning on the AI Campus is organized in a broad collaboration with many different stakeholders, and I think that is also relevant for many who are joining us here today. I believe if you want to be innovative, also looking at micro-credentials, you need a starting point, you need to focus. In our case, this is artificial intelligence. We asked earlier this year institutions to join us for developing innovative learning formats and online courses, and it was more than 130 institutions who applied to work with us, and it's 25 who we are working with now, because we just couldn't handle all these masses of institutions who really want to focus on it. Why do people want to work with us on it? Because there is a gap. There's a skills gap that you cannot fulfill in the higher education system. And I think that is a very promising approach. Start with the gaps and do innovate there. Someone is talking about an echo. Maybe Anthony, you could mute yourself. Maybe that helps. Looking at that gap, we very early decided it's not only the online courses that you have to work on. We have been talking also in EQAF about MOOCs for quite some years. We believe MOOCs are still a thing. I believe there can be high quality MOOCs, and there are out there, but there are many different other formats that also need different other quality assurance processes. When I work with higher education institutions and my colleagues work with them, for example, the quality of videos is so diverse, and many of the students recognize that in times of Corona, right? So we believe that we do not only need stackable degrees, but stackable learning formats, where you have videos, where you have podcasts, and then you build a course, you coursify it, you build a course, you add maybe the necessary examination for the formal credential, and you have a whole learning ecosystem consisting of different formats. And what surprised us is that from the very beginning, also like big universities from Germany, like Frankfurt University, came to us and said, hey, we want to develop an AI micro-credential, you know? And so we are really based on these different formats, we are working on what this university would call a micro-credential, what I believe is one aspect of AI micro-credentials, and I'm really looking forward to implementing that in 2021 already. Again, what you see below is a Creative Commons license. I believe we do not need to look at the existing standards. We also need to look a lot in the European higher education system, especially on openness as a crucial criteria for how we work in higher education, especially if it's about the collaboration with public institutions and if it's funded by governments. The AI Campus went online already in July this year after only 9 months of development. Another aspect of quality assurance in online and smart learning environments is go open as quickly as possible and collect user feedback. User-driven innovation is only possible if we are as transparent as possible to the students, to the outside world. And this is something that higher education institutions I work with are not used to. You know, very often, I mean, we do have academic freedom and we do have our own seminars and courses, but why do we not share that more with others? Why are we not more open about our ideas, about our approaches, and start a process based on guidelines that is based on an exchange, on a continuous exchange about the quality of what we do?
That's a really nice question, and the open question with the end, and hopefully it will be positively end. But there will be no presentation and without the link to QA in this forum. So what are the QA standards which would be applicable to the AI Campus program? What is the relationship between former QA standards and more informal instruction and institutional design principles in open and smart learning environments?
So I sometimes call myself a quality assurance enthusiast. I've been working on quite some projects reflecting the European standards and guidelines and others, and I believe that they are actually the core pillar for anything we do, anything we believe that is innovative can be built upon qualification frameworks that already exist, on EHEA tools that already exist, like the ECT Users Guide and the ESG. But based on these standards, we need to rethink our processes that reflect guidelines in a more collaborative way. So this is why I said the QA and instructional design that we work on is a process more than just a guideline. My colleagues would say it's actually a QA life cycle, a process that repeats itself and that is based on continuous further development. So we do have checklist-based ID and QA principles. I think it is important to make clear sometimes what really is necessary, especially if you want to achieve recognition at a later stage. But you need to include that in an open and transparent evaluation process during course and curriculum development, especially when curriculum development is bringing together different higher education institutions. And then one very important aspect is that you need to continuously review your educational components, the content, from the individual image that you have, from the nice simulation up to the full course. But you also need to look at platform technologies, tools, and features. For example, making use of AI in order to get better feedback from students on the quality of what you offer to them. So looking at the quality of the educational components and the technologies being used is really important in open and smart learning environments. We believe so. This is a very complex and detailed page. I think the key message here is that for us, the guidelines and the requirements, they go through a diverse range of different aspects. And with some of those aspects, we believe we need checkbox. That's what you see on the left. Our instructional design principles, we have certain core principles that higher education institutions need to check them in order for them to be allowed to upload a course on our platform. So there are some no-goes. But looking at the learning content, it is important to be open enough also to institutions that there is this development process that I talked about before. So there we have a traffic light model, something really interesting being discussed in the European context for some time. A traffic light model that has a gray zone, applied, partly applied, and does not apply. And it's important to allow for gray zones with the first iteration round in order to allow institutions to develop throughout time, because especially when we talk about digital learning, it's not done the first time you develop something. And I said that before, it's all integrated into an overall and iterative review and development process. And we need to take evaluation serious. We need to make it transparent. I talked to students just 2 weeks ago who told me there's so much evaluation going on at the moment, and I hate it because I get evaluated, but I never see the outcome. And I think the great benefit of working in an open learning environment is making the outcome visible very quickly. Seeing I got feedback from you, and I improved my learning provision after only a few weeks. This is crucial, and this is not working out sufficiently in many higher education evaluation processes. We only evaluate, we don't show the learners how we improve based on the evaluation. Jakob, should I go to the key learnings, or did you want to ask a question? I can't see Jakob now, so maybe I just continue for the moment. Yeah, so to summarize what I have been talking about, I think we had some key learnings in 2020. To make one aspect transparent also, AI Campus was not supposed to launch in 2020. We started as a research and development project in late 2019 with the goal to go live in early 2021. Then Corona came and many delayed the projects. We decided, no, we're not going to delay. We're going to open up earlier, and we're going just to try out this incremental process. And I think we were successful in that because we had our joint guiding principles. We had agreed upon certain values and standards that we wanted our work to be based on in order to develop our open smart learning environment. The second really important aspect for me is, and for the further development of micro-credential is different learners need different formats, and different formats need different quality assurance processes. It is very important what Elena said before, is that micro-credentials play a role in formal higher education and should in the future even more, but also in lifelong learning provision. And we really need to make sure, and we actually need to develop an extended quality assurance ecosystem that allows for different QA processes for different formats. And I think it's exciting. It's really exciting to do that. I am a strong believer in open education. So I believe that OER is not only key, but we need joint standards for that. It's one of the biggest discussions I'm facing with the 25 higher education institutions I've been working with this year. What are the right Creative Commons licenses? What can we do as a higher education institution to go open? What risks are connected to it? And we need to take away insecurities, and we need to push open education jointly. I believe this really is the future, especially for comparison to all the stuff out there that is available in for-profit context. Of course, I said that very often already before, QA is more than just guidelines. I like guidelines, I like clarity, but I like even more the process with our partners. What I saw as a key learning this year, we need really good key account management, because the AI campus doesn't develop the learning content itself. Our partners do, and for that you need a key account. I need great colleagues who are as passionate as I am about instructional design and quality assurance, and who are likable for higher education institutions. Because only if you see each other as partners, if you have a close and transparent collaboration and communication, you're going to really develop quality assured learning provision. And that is possible through openness and transparency. Openness and transparency really is key for trust, and trust enables recognition. Of course, many of the courses that we develop are not made for recognition in higher education institutions, because it's not necessary with all digital learning provision that you develop, but many are. Talking about the micro degrees that a few big German universities want to implement based on their courses they develop with us. I think we can really go forward and really innovate also recognition processes based on collaboration amongst several higher education institutions. But for this, you need openness amongst the institutions, and you need transparency on the QA that this is based on. Last but not least, QA is only possible if we really listen to the learners and to the teachers. We have an iterative development process with continuous feedback loops. We need to take that serious. We have courses that we developed in July, and we are reworking them already in order to make them even better based on the feedback that we got from different users, especially learners and teachers in higher education. So I'm looking forward to some feedback loops in this session here as well. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this.
Thank you very much, Florian. I hope everything is well with my microphone. I had some technical problems, but if you continued your presenting in the middle of it, it was great that you took over. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think we'll also come back to the questions later on. Since the time is coming up, we'll go to Antoni. Do we have Antoni here? I will shortly introduce the third speaker. It will be Antoni Camilieri. He's a tertiary education policy consultant, founder of Knowledge Innovation Center, and the architect of Europa's digital credentials. So he's focusing in creating European standards and technology infrastructure for recording learning digitally, and he pioneered the annual European Micro-Credentials Masterclass. Please, Antoni, go on.
Thank you very much. So the idea is to have a little bit of a chat about internal quality assurance and how internal quality assurance affects micro-credentials. Okay, so I'll just jump straight in, and if we think about QA of micro-credentials, then there's a couple of different issues we need to look about. The first one is encouraging learning. So what we mean about this is that the purpose of quality assurance is to ensure that there is high quality content, teaching, and assessment. So when we look at this, these are cardinal principles of our quality assurance system. And when people are asking, does this apply to micro-credentials, then they are also asking about, do micro-credentials provide this? So to answer the question, I would simply say that micro-credentials do not actually change the quality of learning at all. The same internal quality assurance procedures that should apply to traditional learning and apply to larger degrees also apply to micro-credentials. There really is no difference. Learning is learning, and the same procedures should apply. That said, there is one proviso to this statement, and that is that the same quality applies, but this also implies that you should use the same quality assurance procedures for micro-credentials. And one of the things we do see with micro-credentials being offered by many institutions, it isn't completely clear if the internal QA that's applied to degrees is actually applied to the micro-credentials as well. So my message here in the first instance really would be that as long as you apply your institutional QA to micro-credentials, there isn't really much difference.
Actually, that's very good to hear. But if we don't have any difference, then why do we have this presentation at all? Could you please explain what you mean by that?
Okay, so within this, I would say that apart from assuring quality of content, internal quality assurance shouldn't just look at content, but it should look at the context of learning. And if we think about the context of learning, what we are really talking about is the life prospects of people who are undergoing a higher education experience. By those life prospects, we could mean further education prospects, we could mean employment prospects, we could mean self-development prospects. But whatever those prospects are, we need to look into issues about transparency, recognition, and portability of those micro-credentials. Because if we aren't transparent, if we aren't recognized, if we aren't portable, then effectively we are not achieving the goal of improving those life contexts. So within this context, I think we can all agree that if we look at the different educational tools out there, degrees are the gold standard. Degrees are pretty much universally recognized. They're universally accepted for employment. They are understood to be at the apex of the educational ladder. So even though we have spent a long time developing recognition tools for degrees, if you look at the different types of educational programs, they definitely are considered the best. The thing is, when we build our quality assurance around degrees, there are several assumptions that have gone into the system design, which we don't usually mention because they're taken for granted by everybody. Some of these assumptions include that a person will not have that many degrees. They will hold 2 or 3 degrees max. Secondly, if you're presenting a degree to an employer, the likelihood is the employer will have heard of that degree and they will have heard of the institution that is providing it. 90% of their applicants will come from institutions and qualifications which they know very, very well. For the cases where an employer or an institution doesn't know the degree, and for people who hold, let's say, stranger degrees, we have manual processes for verification and recognition. And that process is relatively efficient because one recognition action can actually recognize 3 to 5 years of a person's learning. And these are the assumptions, the design principles that have gone into the system of recognition we have now. If we look at this in micro-credentials change all of these assumptions. So first of all, if micro-credentials become widespread, we can assume that we'll have a high volume of micro-credentials. A person could easily hold 5 to 15 micro-credentials. Secondly, a person will have likely taken these micro-credentials from a range of institutions all over the world. So the employer is no longer going to recognize all of these on site. They're going to recognize 2 or 3 of them on site, and the rest they're going to have very, very little information about. Thirdly, a process to recognize them is now going to become far, far less efficient, because one recognition action may only recognize tens of hours of learning rather than years of learning. And in terms of the verification and recognition, we honestly don't have this completely figured out yet because of these challenges and of these base elements that micro-credentials change. So if we think about an internal quality assurance response and how internal quality assurance can help this, we, to some extent, go back to the basics. So the first part of this is transparency. And transparency implies, first of all, detailing the learning outcomes. And secondly, it implies making quality assurance explicit and public. The learning outcomes I'm not going to say much about because I think we can all agree the importance of learning outcomes. When we're talking about making quality assurance, it's not just about publishing your quality assurance policy. It's also making an explicit link between a specific micro-credential and saying, this is the quality assurance procedure this micro-credential has followed, and we can guarantee as an institution that our quality policy stands behind this micro-credential. In terms of recognition, what happens on recognition is that, first of all, we need to make targeting more explicit. So when you go into a lot of micro-credentials, you see that this micro-credential is intended for target group 1, target group 2, target group 3. But you get very little information on which employers specifically would accept a micro-credential. The second part of this is recognition partnerships. Groups of institutions who say, we will recognize credentials between each other and hopefully recognize those micro-credentials semi-automatically. And the third part of this is being able to create reproducible and automatic recognition pathways. And by this, we mean that a student should be able to know in advance that if I present X micro-credential, then this is the recognition process and this is the answer I should expect to receive from an institution. And a reminder that according to the ESGs, fair recognition is an essential component for ensuring students' progress, and that recognition procedures should rely on cooperation between institutions.
Sorry to interrupt, if that's possible to just a bit of speed up to leave some time for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Sure. So once we get into this, the third part of this is portability. And portability implies that we have secure and trusted digital credentials. And secure and trusted digital credentials really means focusing on the envelope of credentials.
I was muted. I was asking about the concept of the envelope, if you could introduce it to participants shortly.
Sure. So in terms of the envelope literally means an envelope. If you think about a DHL package and what makes that delivery secure, a whole bunch of things go into making the envelope that carries your content secure. One is secure packaging, and secure packaging basically makes sure nobody has tampered with the package that's inside. It includes describing information about the body, guaranteeing the quality of the delivery. It involves information about who is issuing the credential and who it is intended for. and includes a lot of traceable information that allows you to audit that the sender was really who they say they are, that the credential is really what it says it is, and that lets you trace every step of the process. So if we think about this same concept in terms of a diploma, the idea of a high quality envelope basically means that you deliver a high quality digital credential that is resistant to fraud and that can be automatically processed by digital systems. And this enables semi-automatic recognition to happen much, much more efficiently and much more easily.
It would be great to hear also from your side, how relevant is this for institutions and the learners? If you could shortly reflect on that, and we can move to the questions.
Sure. So simply enough, I'd like to take one example. We're all living in times of COVID, and contact tracing has taken a really, really important role in the responses to COVID of many, many countries. And one of the things I was thinking was, wouldn't it be great if we had a easy, free-to-follow course to train our contact tracers? I check online, and sure enough, Johns Hopkins University, which I think we can agree is one of the highest quality medical institutions in the world, has deployed exactly that. And I'd like you to look at the number of people enrolled here. There's nearly 1 million people enrolled to this course. Imagine how incredible it is. In a few weeks, a course was produced, published, internally quality assured, and deployed to 1 million people globally. The question I would ask, though, is, apart from the content of this course, is this course suitable for purpose? Is it being used by governments in Europe to train their contact tracers? And to my knowledge, the answer to this question is no. And if we look at the reasons for this no, you see it in the FAQ of the course itself. Will I use university credit for completing the course? No, it does not carry university credit. How do I apply to become a contact tracer? Different cities have different standards. You have to check with them. What will I get if I purchase a certificate? We will give you a downloadable certificate, or you can check it in your profile. And all of these do not imply high quality recognition baked into the internal quality assurance. I don't know if they have applied their degree quality assurance to this course. I don't know if they have the recognition procedures in place. And all of these things create barriers to this course being accepted by somebody like a public administration. And even though we have the free training out there with very, very high quality contents, the fact that the recognition is low quality means that we see headlines like this all over Europe every day. So the message I'd like to leave you with is, if we define quality as fitness for purpose, then we also need to imply more attention to context.
Thank you very much, Antoni. I think my platform is now working. Thank you very much for this presentation and for all of 3 presentations that we had from our presenters. We're gonna now have a short Q&A discussions. We have some questions dropped from the chat. We would like to ask them to the respective speakers. That was not exactly the case after the presentations. Maybe I'll start with Florian. I think that question was directed to you, because it touches your point that you were mentioning. Other courses from the platform that you were mentioning are interchangeable between institutions and the AI project that you were mentioning.
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself first. It's a little laggy somehow.
Exactly, it was the same case for me.
Yeah, too many people joining here. That's a good reason, I'd say. The courses that we are working with are interchangeable by a small number of universities. So I mean, it's a pilot. We didn't expect to have courses actually on the platform this year already. So some of the courses universities applied for jointly. So they're getting funding from the German government to develop an AI course on a certain topic for the AI campus. And they promised recognition on these 2 or 3 higher education institutions. when I was talking about the micro degree, it's like a program that several universities, it's I think 5 institutions being, and there was a question earlier about that as well, being universities and universities of applied sciences, both of them. I think this is very crucial. We have all the qualification frameworks and we still ask, is it the same value? At least for the systems that I work with, I would strongly argue if you have defined a certain qualification level and learning outcomes, it doesn't matter if it's a university or University of Applied Sciences when talking about recognition at a university. And secondly, there was also a question about recognition of prior learning. Some of the courses that we offer are also developed by other institutions who are not higher education institutions. Then we talk about recognition of non-formal prior learning, because these institutions cannot offer an examination process that is like academically recognized, mostly. Huge discussions on that also, but mostly. But there's also possibilities. And what I would really argue for as well is that recognition does not always need to mean that you use a micro-credential to replace a course or module. You can also integrate it. My very much preferred example that I had 5 years ago when I was doing quality assurance in Estonia as a student representative still, was a module at University of Tartu on political sciences, where they had in statistics included a course from Coursera, again, Anthony, from Coursera, that was just equivalent to 3 credit points of workload. But it was only adding to the workload, not to the examination, because University of Tartu still had a module examination. So really important. Recognition of learning does not necessarily need to mean you recognize a full module. You can also just start with integrating micro-credentials in your existing module and still having your examinations that are very often key for recognition. And that we do a lot with the AI campus. That's actually the key argument.
Thank you very much for answering the question and putting the second one also to that. We will probably have time for one more question, since it's going to the end, and we cannot not ask the most voted up question from Brian McGuire here. So our micro-credentials are too small and numerous to be subject to traditional external program accreditation processes. Do they need lighter, more institutionally based accreditation than full degrees? It was a question asked through Elena's session, but feel free to also reflect from your point of view. What do you think? And please take a floor, who everybody feels answering this question.
I could also, but Anthony, I think, should first, huh?
Yeah, I was seeing if Elena had something to say, but look, simply enough, I would agree with you that they are too small and they are too numerous to be subject to traditional accreditation processes.